I used to get so frustrated and disappointed. I put so much faith in people, and people would tell me, Thomas, if you ever want to build more muscle, you need to eat a bunch of carbs. So I did, and I got fat. I mean, I have to say it honestly. So I'm not saying that if you eat carbs, you're going to get fat, but I will say that if your goal is to build muscle, you don't have to have carbohydrates. You absolutely don't have to. Here's the thing that's really important to remember. It is not just about the macronutrients you bring in. It is not just about the protein. It is not just about the fat, and it's most certainly not just about the carbohydrates. It is about the muscle protein synthesis. Okay, and what that is the cellular system that turns on, either black or white, on or off, whether it's time to build muscle or not. Okay, that cellular signaling is everything, and it does not have a whole lot to do with your carbohydrate consumption. So hey, I do want to make sure you hit the red subscribe button and then hit that little bell icon so you never ever miss my videos. And let me be very clear on something. Carbs are not bad. I'm not here to say carbs are bad. Sure, I talk about keto a lot. And yes, I lost 100 pounds with keto, but am I anti-carbohydrate? No. Okay, they have their place. But I just want to make it very clear for those of you that are working really hard to build muscle like I was, I don't want you to think that you need to load up on carbs and potentially gain a bunch of fat, or at the very least not be able to lose fat. It's frustrating. So let's lead off with a study that was published in the Journal of Medicine and Science and Sports and Exercise. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, this study took a look at 9 men. It was pretty cool. 9 men, and they had them do the same kind of resistance training, divided into 2 groups. One group consumed 25 grams of protein only, and another group consumed 25 grams of protein plus 50 grams of carbohydrates. Well, guess what? They found that the group that had the protein and the carbohydrates had a significantly larger insulin spike. Now, at first, that would lead you to believe that they're going to build more muscle. But it turns out the insulin spike doesn't necessarily equal more muscle gain. It actually turned out that both groups had the same amount of muscle protein synthesis. They had the same amount of muscle protein synthesis. They had the same potential to build muscle between 2 groups. And guess what? They had the same amount of muscle protein breakdown. So both groups lost the same amount of muscle, and both groups gained the same amount of protein synthesis. Now, I don't want to beat something over again and again, but I do want to reference another study. All right, this one was published in the American Journal of Physiology, Endocrinology, and Metabolism. This one, we'll just keep it really short. They found, and they concluded with the study, that the co-ingestion of carbohydrates along with protein did not affect muscle protein synthesis. What that means? It doesn't matter. If they consume carbohydrates, it didn't change anything. But let's dive in a little bit deeper to some other things. Here's the interesting thing. Protein itself is insulinogenic. What that means is protein will spike your insulin. So the whole thing with insulin is that it's pro-growth, right? We need to spike insulin to turn on growth of the muscle or growth of tissue. I understand that, but it's not entirely true. It is a pro-growth hormone, but it's not necessarily required. But the point is, either way, protein spikes your insulin. Maybe not as much as carbohydrates, but enough for the protein to actually do its job. You may have heard before that whey protein spikes your insulin. Well, it does, but all protein spikes your insulin. It just so happens that whey protein spikes it really fast because it absorbs really fast. Now, if you go all the way back to 1967, that's when the first real studies came out that found, wait a minute, protein actually spikes insulin. So they found, and it was published in the Advances of Bioscience, that literally amino acids that came from protein made it so that insulin spiked. Now, why did this happen? When you look at it from a biological standpoint, from sort of an evolutionary standpoint, it makes sense. The body sees protein come in, and it doesn't want to just have it go to waste. It wants to magically allow it to be used. So protein by itself triggers enough of an insulin spike to utilize the amount of protein you consume. If you consume 20 grams of protein, your body is going to secrete just enough insulin for you to utilize said 20 grams. Our bodies are really powerful when it comes to that. And here's the other cool thing that you have to pay attention to, is that since protein is insulinogenic, if you factor it with other things that improve protein synthesis, you're going to get even more out of it. A good example would be omega-3s, right? Like right after a workout, if you have a good amount of protein that is high in omega-3, maybe some salmon or maybe some lean grass-fed, grass-finished beef, you're going to have a higher degree of protein synthesis, meaning your body's going to use more of that protein, okay? So just for reference, if you guys do want to check out, I did put a link for ButcherBox down below. You've seen me talk about them in all of my videos. They're an online meat delivery service, so they deliver grass-fed, grass-finished meat right to your doorstep. Super inexpensive, super easy. Quite frankly, it's what myself and my family uses now, so I just highly recommend it, and I put a special link down below since I thought this was a relevant video and that it would make sense. So you get a discount if you use the link down below. Anyway, check them out, but not until after you finish this video, please. All right, so now let's talk about 3 important things that your body needs in order to build muscle. And if you understand these 3 fundamentals, you will have a clear picture of everything you need to really know. You won't have to rely on carbohydrates, and you definitely won't have to listen to those like people telling you that you need to load up on carbs all the time, right? So the 3 things that you need energy that comes through the Krebs cycle. We don't have to talk a lot about the Krebs cycle, but basically you need energy that's metabolized, okay? Then secondly, you need amino acids in order to build muscle, right? And then thirdly, you need to be able to actually put those amino acids to use via cell signaling through what's called mTOR. So that's the trifecta there. Energy, building blocks, aminos, and the cell signaling switch turned to the on position. It doesn't matter how much in the way of calories and protein you have. If that cell switch is not in the on position, you're not building muscle. So here's what we have to remember. Branched chain amino acids carry out all of these things. But branched chain amino acids aren't just what we think of them. They're not just a supplement that we get, right? We think branched chain amino acids are just in a powder form. They naturally come that way. Our body breaks down tissues, breaks down food, all that stuff into branched chain amino acids. The thing is, branched chain amino acids are great when it comes down to ultimately building muscle, but we don't want our body to break them down from our protein tissues in our body in order to get used. So the body will try to recycle them. So what I mean by this is the body can recruit amino acids out of our muscle, which breaks down our muscle. And that's how we lose size. That's how we lose muscle. Okay? So that's not always the best thing. So that's where people think, oh, well, if I consume branched chain amino acids in a supplement form, then I'm solving the problem. And yes, in some ways you are, but hear me out on this because I'm playing devil's advocate. You can consume those branched chain amino acids and it will help you in terms of not breaking down muscle, but it's going to stall your fat loss. So yes, they can preserve muscle, but at the expense of fat because it goes to the front of the line and they spike your insulin. My whole point in saying this is if you are not eating carbohydrates, here's what happens. If you're not eating carbohydrates, your body starts producing ketones. And ketones are a much more efficient fuel source for the body, which means that the mitochondria and the cells are going to feed on the ketones rather than the branched chain amino acids. So if you're following me here, what that means is the amino acids that are normally in your muscles would normally have to get sucked out of your muscles to fuel the body, which means you lose muscle. If you have ketones as a buffer, the ketones will fuel the cells, and the ketones come from your fat, so your fat is fueling your cells, leaving the branched chain amino acids available to build muscle. So rather than the branched chain amino acids getting sucked out of the muscle just for energy, the branched chain amino acids are actually left in the body to be used to build muscle. So in effect, the ketogenic diet or lower carb diets actually make it so that you have more muscle building potential, or at the very least, less muscle wasting risk. You do not need carbs to build muscle, but you do need the right kinds of proteins. And that's where we kind of come back to the simplicity of all of this. You need to get your clean proteins in. You should still get them in somewhat close to your workout so you get maximum muscle protein synthesis. But most importantly, you need to be in that muscle protein synthesis mode, which means you need to be working out. You need to be doing the things that your body needs as the catalyst to build muscle. And again, when it comes down to getting quality meat and things like that, you can use that link down below because I don't want you wasting your money on stuff at the grocery store. But the big point of this is you don't need the carbs. Now, a lot of the science is already done here, but I felt like I wanted to at least tack something on to the end of this video to talk about sort of my experience and my story. A lot of people always want to hear, you know, the science, and then they want to hear like the practical side of things. So if you want to tune out of this video, turn off, totally fine. Absolute, still respect. All right. How I ended up overweight really was a result of trying to build muscle the wrong way. Okay, honestly, it went overboard. I loaded up on carbs. My post-workout meals were things like tater tots, enchiladas. I was having lots of protein, but I was also loading up on carbs because I was just listening to the stuff that was out there. Okay? And then next thing you know, life catches up with me. I get stressed out. I get into a busy career, and I'm still eating like that because I got addicted to carbohydrates because I was trying to eat a lot of them to build muscle. So think about it like this. Here's just a macro view of it. Thomas was actually skinny. Thomas wanted to build muscle. So Thomas ate a bunch of carbs and a bunch of protein. Thomas got kind of fat, but started to build some muscle, and he was happy. Thomas got addicted to carbohydrates because he was consuming literally like 600 grams of them per day, got addicted to them. Then Thomas got busy. Thomas got stressed out. Thomas ended up in a corporate environment where he was sedentary all the time. Thomas was still addicted to carbohydrates. So Thomas loaded up on them and kept eating them and kept eating them, even though I was working out 1 day a week instead of 6. Well, next thing you know, I'm close to 300 pounds. And yeah, I have a little bit of muscle on me, and you can look at my pictures and you can see, yeah, okay, yeah, he was still a decently muscled guy, but I looked like the typical, stereotypical kind of ex-football player, football coach that used to be a football player and then now still thinks he's a football player, but is just overweight. That was me. And it was honestly, a big part of it was just doing the wrong things, triggering inflammation in my body, and the pursuit of muscle that got me hooked on the drug that we call carbohydrates. So I'm not saying that carbs are totally bad, but if you fall into the trap of using them as just your tool all the time and not just a proper implementation of them, you can run into a problem. So anyhow, that's just a little bit of my story. I can do more videos on my story, but I want to see if there's actually interest by comments down below. So I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.